Welcome everyone to DevProdEng Showdown, as we call it, DPE Showdown. Today we have an exciting topic of CI at scale, and CI lives in a place that it impacts developer productivity and developer experience so much that we thought we'd bring in the folks that manage CI for hundreds and thousands of developers and projects, whatnot, at very large companies, and to share their stories and their wins. And it's going to be quite exciting and interesting topic for us. What DevProdEng Showdown is about, sponsored by Gradle and the Gradle team. We want to provide thought leadership in developer productivity engineering in a fun way. And Showdown is kind of like a game show. And how it works is we have 8 topics today. And each panelist will get 30 seconds per topic. And then at the end, you, the audience, gets to vote via a polling mechanism via Zoom and vote for who you thought gave the best answer, where you learned something from. And that's what we're trying to achieve today, is having you learn hopefully 8 or 9 or 10, whatever new things right today. And you leave with 30 minutes, great content from the experts here. Let's jump in to introduce our panelists for today. First off, from Gradle, we have Dan. Dan is quite a unique here. He doesn't work on the centralized CI team, but he worked at Jenkins for a very long time at CloudBees with the Jenkins teams, helping large customers be successful with Jenkins. So he has a lot of interesting stories to tell from that perspective. Next up, we have Rahul from Netflix. His team manages CI for many different platforms, projects, thousands of developers, right? He has a lot of interesting knowledge to share with us. Next up, we have Valera from Slack. I've known this gentleman for a long time now, right? He's one of the great leaders when it comes to developer productivity engineering at Slack. And last but not least, Yohan. Not only have I known him since he worked at Twitter and whatnot, he's also my neighbor. I see him all the time. We walk our kids to school together. I see him in soccer. I see him in school activities. He's everywhere. Not only that, he's been working on CI at scale for a long time, and that's what he does at Uber today. All right, let's jump in. The first one is it's a fun one, and kind of an icebreaker to kind of get things going. What's the best CI platform on the market today, and why? And talk about, I mean, it doesn't have to be something that you use today, but what do you guys like, right? What did you see value in? Dan, you're up first.
All right. So, I mean, given my background, I'm somewhat obligated to say Jenkins, in part because many of the things that other CI systems are trying to do today were done with Jenkins many years ago. It went through its own phase of trying to get closer to developers and provide powerful ways to make pipelines work through groovy pipelines and pipelines as code and that sort of thing. It's been around for quite a while. But to do CI at scale well, you kind of have to pull back from that idea a bit. And Jenkins did that with not only declarative pipelines, but central pipelines.
Nice. Thanks, Dan. We got one for Jenkins. Rahul, what about you? What's your favorite, or the tool that you think does it for you first when it comes to CI?
A bunch of split votes. So if you want something very easy to use, I would say go for GitHub Actions. You don't have to manage infrastructure. If you want a lot of customization, we use Jenkins. The other part of CI is dependency updates, and we have bespoke tooling, and that's what most build systems need. But if you want something low effort, again, go for RenovateBot. It works great.
All right. 3 different scenarios and 3 of your favorites. Thank you. Next up, Valera, what do you think?
I asked myself this exact same question about a year ago, and after a thorough evaluation, I landed on BuildKite. It's hybrid model where we bring our own runners, but they provide the scalable orchestration, fits our security and performance needs really well. They really have some advanced pipeline features like dynamic pipelines and more recently test analytics. We get top-notch support through a shared Slack channel. They have incidents, but they're very also transparent about publishing postmortems.
Yohan, to wrap it up.
Yeah, so It's really hard to say the best overall, but for Uber specifically, we also just recently migrated from Jenkins to Build Guide. So I'm going to stop laughing when Dan mentioned he used to work at Jenkins. The three aspects that we optimize the most out of Build Guide is the scalability and flexibility of the host managements. Build Guide allow us to use on-prem mixed with AWS, and so we can run different hosts. And the plugins are very easy to use. And there are some new reportings that we take advantage of, like test flakiness and build reliability.
All right, we got two for Build Guide, we got two for Jenkins, and some GitHub Actions in there as well. Thanks all. Audience, your turn to vote. Who do you think gave you the most insights on benefits and use cases for these CI tools? All right, who do we got on here? It's so small, I can barely read it. We got Rahul. We got Rahul here. Nice one, Rahul. Okay, now that we got the icebreaker out of the way, let's go to the fun one. What can you share as far as interesting success stories that you've witnessed or experienced in the last 12 months? Yohan, you're up first this time.
For us, the last 12 months, our focus has been this migration. So it sounds like a very trivial project, but just to give you an idea of our scale, on a monthly basis, we run 40 million minutes of builds, executing about 500 to 600 million number of tasks. So the number of people and the infrastructures that we need to build to be able to migrate from Jenkins that were designed purely using on-prem to use these dynamic queues that, some run on-prem, some run on AWS. It's a massive project there.
Wow. 40 million minutes of CI. Wow. Valera, you're up next.
All right, for our team, I'm going to go with bringing down the median time it takes to run through PR checks on iOS. We brought that down from 60 minutes to 10 minutes. And we did that through a combination of modularizing our code base, adopting a modern build system. Sorry, it's not Gradle, it's Bazel for iOS. Optimizing both our CI pipelines and the infrastructure where things run. So switching to bare metal mix really helped us there. And most recently, we rolled out a feature that dynamically generates the CI pipeline based on the files that changed in the PR.
Great stuff. Wow, that's a big win for iOS. That's Slack. Rahul, you're up next.
We have great tooling to start new projects, and that will do your repository setup, your job setup, your infrastructure setup. But it's easy to forget to tear things down when you're done with that project. So we started looking at jobs that never ran in 6 months. And as a first pass, we disabled about 52% of all active jobs, and only 3% were re-enabled by people who thought they actually needed them. So that was a huge win.
Awesome. CI tech debt. Dan, to wrap it up.
All right, last year I worked with a pharmaceutical company that rolled out Jenkins and OpenShift using a horizontal scaling model, had repository auto discovery to create the jobs automatically and get rid of them automatically. And those pipelines that it used were common. So when that Log4j issue came out last summer, they were able to very quickly put in the scanning tools necessary to identify those issues and figure out which projects needed remediation and the most least disruptive way possible. That was pretty cool.
Well, that's pretty awesome. All right, audience, time for you to vote on who do you think made the best point that you learned something new from. All right, we got a Valera on the board. Yeah, that iOS win, it's not easy. It's a hard time for iOS folks these days. Okay, next topic. Best practices application developers should take to triage their PR failures. This is a very interesting one. Valera, you're up first.
All right, I think it really depends a lot on your CI setup and what kind of UX is offered to you. But universally, I think first step is take a deep breath and say to yourself that everything is going to be all right. And then read the error messages. I think it's amazing how much you can actually discover if you're patient enough to read the error messages. But finally, if it's not related to your PR, check if there is an outage going on. And if you want to really go a step beyond that, see if the same failure is popping up on other PRs. Finally, reach out to your support team, to your friendly CI team, if you don't know how to diagnose it.
All right, Yohan, you're up next.
The three best practices we ask our engineers to do is one is make sure you retry first. So retry the CI build, retry on your local machine. The basic principle is if it happens one, it will happen again. At some level, we have to assume engineering issue, or no matter how arbitrary it seems, it's not a random error. It's a result of programming fault. And the other one is search for known issues first. And when you report it, make sure it's detailed and make sure it's specific. If you can't articulate the problem, we can't help you to fix it.
Dan, you're up next.
Yeah, number one is to avoid PR failures in the first place. But when you create a PR, you should have a high level of confidence that the CI job for that PR will work. So do more local builds, embrace the idea of fast feedback. If your local builds are not fast enough, I may know some people who could help you with that. Combine that with the detailed telemetry you can get from a Maven or Gradle build scan, along with the failure history that you can find in something like Gradle Enterprise. That should give you what you need to quickly identify the root cause of PR failures and just be better at that kind of stuff in the first place.
Appreciate the Gradle Enterprise plug in there. Yeah. Yeah, we do have an app for that, right? Yeah. All right, Rahul, to wrap it up.
The first is use structured logging, so tools can understand what is going on. The second is be intentional about dependencies. So library dependencies are very easy, but you also have environment dependencies and network dependencies. And you need to find a way to be very clear what you want, because when you have a very large system, things can move around. And the third is use tools that are well supported. That I think should be very simple.
All right, audience, time for you to vote. Who made the best point? All right, Dan, you're on the board. Shift left, run more tests locally. Yeah, it makes sense, right? All right. Okay, next one. What is the most important metric data that you collect around CI quality of service? This is a super hot topic these days. And we have Rahul, you're up first.
When talking to users, the most important thing is latency, or how long it takes for the build to start. But when talking to someone a few levels up the management chain, we start talking about throughput, or how long does it take for us to get a critical change across all of our fleet. So think something like the Log4j thing that happened about 2 years ago, and the desire to have almost everything remediated as soon as possible.
Dan, you're up next.
Well, an investment bank I was working with last year had issues with their quality of service. And so it was a common thing for engineers to not trust the CI system. And we started to look at the failure rate of CI jobs. It was easily like 40 to 50% of their jobs were failing. We found out that the developers simply would rerun the failed jobs with no changes, hoping it would work, crossing their fingers. So while they did have flaky tests, it was not enough to justify that behavior. So essentially, getting that fixed allowed them to reduce that fail rate. So I'd say the fail rate is the one to look for.
All right, Yohan, you're up next.
We use 3 different metrics: reliability, and we focus on actionable and unactionable errors. So any builds that resulted in unactionable errors, so errors that is not caused by the change itself, so it could be flaky tests or existing CI failures, so that we can count that as an error. Latency is how long an engineer has to wait. And the last one is what we call the availability, which is sort of a combination of reliability and latency. So the idea is if it takes too long, then it's pretty much unavailable.
Yeah, reliability. Yeah, it's a big one. And Valera, to wrap it up.
Right. If I only had to pick one, I would go with developer satisfaction. We measure this on a quarterly basis via developer sentiment surveys. And at the end of the day, I think this is what matters the most. But if we go down a step below that, we also measure performance. In our case, how long the PR checks take to pass. And also stability. And we measure main branch build stability, which in our case is kind of a proxy measure for how stable the CI system is, because main branch build stability should be always 100%. So it's easy to measure.
Great one. Audience, what do you think? Who did you like the most? Valera got the most points there. Nice. Valera in the lead. Okay, next one. When do you use build versus CI to optimize parallelization of overall build time? Ooh, it's a good one. Dan, you're up first.
It's quite simple. If a build or test tool can do things in parallel, that's where you start. I mean, I saw a customer change their build time from an hour to 5 minutes simply by turning parallel on. Where CI can help us with fast feedback to run other things in parallel, such as code quality scans and any other tools that don't necessarily need the build artifact. So when you do that, it can actually make things more efficient. When you do those things in combination, use the best tool for the job on parallel in the build tool, parallel in CI, use them both.
Rahul, you're up next.
So I've got 3 examples. One was where our node dependency downloads were very slow, and we figured out that it was because we had EBS volumes that were attached, and we could switch to instances with on-instance storage, and that suddenly sped up their builds by a huge factor. The other example was where we had slow tests in Java, and we enabled Gradle test distribution, and that was great. The third one was dependency resolution for Java being slow, and we fixed it by collaborating with the team to prime the cache before we start building.
Right. I was worried you were going to get all 3 in there, but you pulled it off in 30 seconds. Good job. Valera, you're up next.
All right, 30 seconds is not enough for this question, but I would first of all ask yourself what you want to expose to developers in terms of the UX. It's much easier to expose like a GitHub status if it's running it as a parallel step in a job. So I would start there. But if we're focused solely on performance, I think it becomes a matter of what's practical to keep within the boundary of a machine. And basically, modern build systems are really good about parallelizing stuff. And some of them have remote execution that can pan out across different machines, but most of them don't.
Next one, Yohan.
The way we choose it is based on the user experience. So if a certain build target affects developer experience during development, not just bug runs like CI, then we would try to optimize the build. For CI, there are limited actually what you can do, but they're mostly very powerful. For us, the 2 strategies that we always use when we try to optimize CI is sharding, so trying to split the number of jobs into parallel jobs and run them on different machines. And the other one is CTC, which is change target calculation. So the idea is trying to filter out only affected build graphs and ignore the rest that are not impacted by the PR.
All right, great. Audience, whose point did you like the most? I can't even see who the winner is. Rahul by a smidge. All right, this is another fun one. What is the most asked for request from your customers, the application teams? Yohan, you're up first.
We have a lot of different asks, but the one category that always popular is basically how to reduce the engineer's time in spotting the CI error and reproing the same error. So improving the log output, and the last one that we just did recently is being able to archive all the linter reports as a build artifact. That's a very popular ask, and this way engineers can just quickly pinpoint the exact error, as opposed to they have to go through the different log and retry it first before they know what happened.
Very interesting. Valera, you're up next. What are folks at Slack asking for?
All right, it's never enough speed and stability. Those are like the number 1 and 2. And if things are a little bit flaky but fast, devs are pretty tolerant to having to hit that retry button. Similarly, if your build takes a while but it's super stable and consistent, then they're also a little bit more forgiving about that. But of course, ideally, you want to have both. And finally, a good UX is what I think takes you to the elite level. It's basically the UX of investigating when things fail. And having things be consistent and performant in terms of the UI.
Rahul, you're up next.
At Netflix, we don't have a lot of build and CI engineers. So most engineers are really good at what their primary job is and not very comfortable with doing build and CI things. So they're primary ask is make things easier for us. And that comes in various ways. One is making it easier to configure their CI through standard templates, through configuring their build through plugins, and so on.
All right, Dan, to wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, the most common request I heard last year in particular was for teams to move to a YAML-based CI tool because they felt like things like GroovyScript weren't very useful. And a lot of times when I see people try to go through a migration effort, they end up creating more of a mess than when they stayed with what they had. It's better to make what you have better and avoid the migration than to go through that. Anyway, it was kind of an odd one.
Okay, audience, time for you to vote. All right, Yohan is on the board. Okay, next one. What is the secret sauce for maintaining CI quality of service for thousands of engineers? If it was one thing or what would that be? Valera, you're up first.
All right. This is going to sound pretty trivial, but a regular practice of looking at the metrics that you have and taking action items on these metrics and actually fixing them, fixing issues that pop up. I mean, you can have all the great observability and alerting in the world, but if you actually don't look at the data and take action on it on a regular basis, it doesn't really matter. At Slack, we do this on a weekly basis. We have a meeting where we just look at the metrics and then we fix stuff. And then do that for a while, and your CI experience will be great.
Sounds so simple, but not everybody does it. Yohan, you're up next.
For us, the secret sauce is customer obsessed. So most of our CI code is actually in the same repo as the application that we're supporting. So we experience the same diff pipelines. We experience the same any pain points, any infra failures. This way, we have very close empathy to engineers, and we always try to optimize the experience because we also go through the same pain points as our customers.
Love that customer obsession approach. Dan, you're up next.
Yeah, standardize your pipelines and the agents that are used to build that code. This does not mean creating a one-size-fits-all pipeline, as the bank I worked with tried to do. It means modeling the types of applications and code and having a set of standards that kind of work. Requires keeping your pipeline simple, your agents simple, and ephemeral will make a big difference. A new CI tool won't solve this as the telecom company I was thinking about earlier. But running your CI system properly, as last year's keynote speaker at DevOps World, will make all the difference in the world.
And
Rahul, to wrap it up.
Find opportunities for easy wins. A lot of these easy wins will stack up to make your offering much better. So 5 years ago, we had rollouts that used to take months, and there were always risks involved. And we started chipping away at these things slowly. And now it takes about a week for some and under 2 days for others. And you can't really help your customers until you found a way to solve your own problems.
All right, audience, time for you to vote. Valera, Bayern, Smidge. Nice. All right, the last one, but a fun one. What is the best way to make your CI machines work harder? How do you maximize the throughput? Rahul, you're up first.
So API systems try to focus on latency, and batch systems try to focus on throughput. And CI is somewhere in between, in that when you're scaling up, they look like API systems. And when they scale down, they resemble batch systems. So we had to build a lot of custom tooling to be able to auto scale and maintain costs in check. And the most important thing is machines are expensive, but humans are way more expensive than machines. So try to focus on humans first.
I love it. Try to focus on humans first. So simple, but beautiful. Dan, what do you think?
I would change the question to say more efficiently, right? Pushing CI to its limits doesn't mean that you're maximizing throughput. I've seen organizations with highly efficient Jenkins declarative pipelines with very fast build times, primarily because they had a team that was focused on maintaining the common set of pipelines for thousands of teams. This also means that you can implement proper usage of build tools like Gradle and Maven to run things in parallel and take advantage of build caching and provide detailed feedback for both the CI team and developers to improve overall efficiency.
Yohan, you're up next.
The basic goal is to minimize the idle time of your CPU resources and also maximize the shared memory available. And one strategy that we took recently is to create this queue, which is a build kite term for cluster of hosts, and we bucket them based on how much resource or how fast a build will take. So we'll have what we call large bucket, small bucket, medium bucket, and depending on how long and how much resource, we group them in there. We found that much more efficient than using function-based bucketing.
Valera, to wrap it up.
Right. First thing, I would focus on avoiding unnecessary work by making your builds and CI pipelines efficient. On the infrastructure side, I would evaluate different classes of machines and find the point at which you get diminishing returns in terms of performance versus cost. And last but not least, avoid having idle runners. And you can do that either by creating agents on the fly with Kubernetes or whatever, or having some sort of auto-scaling that scales down your CI on weekends and nights when it's not being used.
I have to say, those were all great answers. Audience, your turn to vote. Got Valera again. That makes you the winner, Valera. Why don't you get your 15 seconds of fame? What do you have to say to our audience here?
Yeah, I don't have any personal project to plug, so I'm just gonna provide my support to the people of Ukraine who are struggling quite a lot right now, and just if anyone in Ukraine is watching, we are with you.
Beautiful. Thanks to everyone, especially our panelists for today, and of course, Gradle, Slack, Uber, Netflix for allowing you folks to participate and share your wins and share your stories and share your metrics. Thanks to those engineering teams and thanks to the audience for attending. Stuff that I want to plug, I got to plug some stuff where we just announced $99 tickets for the DPE Summit. It's going to be in San Francisco, September 20th. We got the DPE maturity model. It's pretty interesting if you want to see where you stack rank in the DPE maturity model. Use free build scans. They're a free tool for you to see what's happening in your build and what's happening in your tests. And a lot of the stuff that you heard today, those metrics we capture in those build scans. That's it for me. I think the next lowdown is with LinkedIn productivity engineering, folks. That's going to be in May. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.